So I can help us wrap up because I had this question. I was going to ask you, Martin, directly, but I think we've all batted it around. So for all of us, it's like, where do we see the overall future of content management systems? I'm calling it content management system because that's the broad term of Drupal headless, how we're going to manage our build our websites, or I think the proper term to align with trees is to build our experiences that we're creating on the web, because it's not about
Yeah.
websites anymore. It's and Drupal's trying to fit into that. It's not a CMS, but I think that helps marketer. I don't know. CMS is a
I'll,
good old term. So Nick, you
yeah,
go
I'll,
first.
I'll jump in first. I mean, I don't think Drupal's going anywhere, right? I mean, I've if it does, I'll be very sad. But I think that a couple of things that CMSs do, especially Drupal, that are more painful in a React world are things like the actual content entry. Like
I 100% agree.
that whole system has to be built up if you're purely a React site. The databaseification of the content, right? Normalizing all that stuff. React by default uses like MongoDB, which is a NoSQL, like normalizing that, getting the data clean. Like you end up having to, you have to do a little bit of this even if you're using Drupal as the backend, but especially if you're using Mongo or DynamoDB as your backend, like every time you call the data, you have to be like, well, does this data actually exist? Is it in the right format? Is it, because you can put whatever you want into it, like, and that's something that Drupal, like sanitizing the data, making sure it's valid, that kind of stuff. Drupal does great out of the box. The other thing that Drupal does that is difficult in those situations: translation, user management, role management, all that kind of stuff. Drupal kind of just we sometimes take for granted. Um, and it's I've built those systems before. It is difficult. It is painful.
Right.
Like especially when you're getting to like the granularity of the permissions that many times we get with Drupal. Like you can give people not just CRUD level permissions for content, but ownership CRUD level permissions. Um, or with a few modules, you can say like this person can edit this field, but not this
Yeah,
field.
the
Those
collaboration.
kinds those
Yeah.
kinds of things are difficult and not difficult. Maybe not difficult, but take take a lot of time. If you're going to do them correctly in a headless situation. And Drupal excels at that kind of stuff. Um, so I don't think it's going anywhere.
I'll go next because I mean, what I want to summarize what you said and kind of echo, like, I think content authoring is going to be one of the biggest things people are going to double down on, because that's what is important. If we want to create rich user experience, we have to have good content and make it easier for someone to author it. Even omni-channel, like I always am thrown off, like when you're in Drupal's admin, you're authoring content to think of it displayed on a page, but rarely do you think of how it will be displayed on voice or read out loud on Alexa, and how we get those previews working. And then just, I hadn't thought about it, but when you bring up permissions, workflow roles, that's all content administration. And those two sides, I think Drupal is going to keep excelling and focusing on that. We're going to have to double down on the authoring experience and improve it even more. I do think Drupal's got the best authoring experience in the CMS market because of the flexibility. Because you can't, it's not one size fits all for building relationships. It just depends on the scale. And Drupal offers 4 different ways to be like, oh, here's related people. Here's inline entity references to people. Here's paragraphs if you really want to do it that. Like, there's just so many different ways to provide an experience. I see that as a very important thing. And the only other thing that I've hinted at is I really see CMS is needing to become ridiculously stable in the back end, as like future proofed. You're going to build a CMS backend and that's it. Your organization's going to stay on it, and they're just going to evolve the architecture and never either. Maybe they replatform. That would be, they would never do an upgrade. It would be about a strategy to keep it evolving. So that there's my add-on.
I can go next. John, if you don't mind.
You want to do the wrap up, John?
Sure.
Saving the best for last.
So I don't know about that. But
if you look at the analysts like Gartner or Forrester, they've actually dropped web CMS as a category that they analyze, because according to them, it's basically become a commodity. So you think about, it used to be that it was sort of, Drupal and WordPress and Clone and a couple of these other ones. But now with sort of, the Wix and the Squarespaces and a variety of other sort of, SaaS and CaaS type options, there really is a lot more in terms of, just options available. And so I think it's interesting that Drupal, I feel like, is coming back in a way to sort of how it used to be a bit more when I started using Drupal, where a lot of the modules were not so much around being kind of like developer toolkits as really being more sort of full-fledged solutions. So it used to be that there was like a job search module that was the whole job system, and it was, had a bunch of sort of functionality basically baked into it. And so as a site owner, if you needed that, you installed this module and it was basically ready to go. And I feel like recipes is moving us back in that direction. I think even things like schema.org blueprints makes it easier for people to sort of add these sort of sections to their website without sort of having to have as much Drupal expertise. So I'm hopeful that by making it easier for site owners, you think about Project Browser now to, add some of these things as a solution, go into the UI, they can quickly build out their website and have something that's more than just, going through and configuring sort of individually piece by piece. You can really sort of rough out potentially a fairly robust application in a short amount of time without having to have a lot of technical expertise. And so I think that's definitely an area that I find exciting about the direction Drupal is moving in right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you all have hit on the benefits, and I technically I think I agree with everybody. I will say that we've been highlighting it throughout this show. And one thing that I want to add is that, you can choose, as Jacob said, you can choose. There are, SaaS solutions out there, Contentful, Squarespace. As we've been highlighting through this show, it depends what problem you're trying to solve, what solution is going to work best for you. I think where Drupal excels above a lot of these solutions, and to be quite frank, I think that Jacob said it earlier, where Drupal helps industry, helps corporations, and is it can be considered a corporate CMS, is this flexibility. Every client that I've ever worked with, especially if a marketing team is involved, or a site owner is involved, or multiple brands or units are involved, flexibility has been a huge a huge factor in their decision making process, right? And I think Drupal has the most amount of flexibility because, as we all know, we can do anything with Drupal. I like to tell our clients, like, we can do anything with Drupal with enough time and money, right? Yeah. And I think overall, I don't know specific cost structures of some of the SaaS solutions, but I think, they get you pretty close to what you need, right? But they're not as flexible in content architecture, content modeling, right? They're not as flexible in the ability to pull a module off the shelf and have an integration or a feature ready to use. Or the customizations, because again, when you think of corporate entities, they still have legacy systems they have to integrate. They still have specific internal systems that they have to integrate with. So, I think overall, when you're looking at when you're looking at Drupal, it may not necessarily be the cheapest option up front, right? But I think in the long term, especially going back to that model of not having to do major upgrades every year, now being able to feature enhance and to improve as you go, right? You're looking at a much cheaper year over year solution, a much more flexible year over year solution, and really, the solution that's probably going to support your organization for the long term. So yes, I agree with all of you. And, I think that, clearly I'm a Drupal fanboy, so maybe my opinion is a little bit biased, but based on what I've seen, I think that the flexibility and the customization is key and what people are really looking for, because the second you go to a SaaS option, and that SaaS option doesn't do that one thing that the marketing team needs it to do, or that one thing that a C-level employee needs it to do, like that solution is dead to them. That solution is not solving the problem, right?
Yeah, and the cost scaling too is another thing. Like Jacob said, like many times, like it's kind of twofold too. Like a lot of these SaaS solutions is like per user. So if you have a large organization that has 500 users that need to be able to edit content, well, I mean, yeah, there's going to be added cost of Drupal too, because if you have 500 people editing content, you need bigger servers, right? Than you do if you have 5 editors. But it's not going to be $50 a month per user,
right?
And same thing for a lot of these SaaS companies will charge you by traffic, right? And if you have a bump in traffic, it's like, well, now our bill just went up by $50,000 this month. Whereas Drupal, again, if traffic goes up, you might need bigger servers, but that scale is, even if you're adding a couple of servers.
I don't know. I think Drupal's caching layer and the ability to add something like Cloudflare in front of it can help with that. But I feel like our next Fact or Fiction show is going to be SaaS, Fact or Fiction.
SaaS is here to stay.
I think we just circled around. Like Drupals are real for enterprise stuff. It's really a good thing to have in your infrastructure. It's like if you expect to be building sites that are large, to have this in your toolbox. And Martin, I think the whole question is deciding the right way to use it. It's a tool. It's not a hammer. It's a set of tools, and you got to figure out the right way to use it in your infrastructure and evolve it. I also think, Martin, one thing we didn't say is like you should use it, maybe not go headless, but keep thinking about it. Keep monitoring every project you get. You have to almost assess, would this benefit from a React front end?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to it's the glue or the traffic cop in a lot of organizations, right? Like you can it's the Swiss Army knife of backends, if you will.
Yeah.